Welcome to the Wow Factor, where we bring you raw conversations with today's extraordinary business leaders. The goal is to apply their words of wisdom to help you become a better leader in business and beyond. And here's your host, Brad Formsma.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Wow Factor Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Formsma. Thank you for your ratings, your reviews, subscribing to the podcast, and most importantly, sharing it with your other friends that are leaders. Well, we always like to have a fun fact on the Wow Factor, and today the fun fact is this. Did you know that the word plastic in plastic surgery doesn't have anything to do with actually plastic? It is plasticose, which means to make new. You say, why do you have that as a fun fact today? It's because we have a world-renowned plastic surgeon, leader, entrepreneur, inventor, visionary, and we're going to learn things that I think you're going to want to understand about this world of really it's progressive medicine at its finest. So our guest today is Dr. Bradley Bengtson from the Bengtson Center in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Just a couple little things to get you ready for it. He's going to unpack what absolutes, beliefs, and preferences are and how they've played a role in his life. He's going to talk about how it's just a gift that he's been given to be able to restore beauty to people. And then, being a classic entrepreneur, he gets those early morning insights between 2 and 3. And then his kind of closing remark, which I think is so strong, you know what, really the best kind of plastic surgery is in the patients that you can't tell they had it. Well, without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Bengtson. Well, Brad, it's great to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks, Brad.
So where were you brought up?
So I grew up in a smaller town, Anderson, Indiana. It's about halfway between Fort Wayne and Indianapolis. And I grew up there. My dad was chairman of the music department at Anderson College, now Anderson University. And I ended up going to AU for my undergrad and then on to Indiana for medical school.
Okay, so we're in high school, and what's life like for you in high school?
It was pretty crazy. We actually were a very booming GM town. We had 3 high schools, and my high school had about 2,500 students in it. So we had 800 people per class, and there were 3 high schools. Anderson, Indiana was the largest. It was pretty intense. It was kind of an inner city school, and there's a lot of racial tension during that time. But the city itself was really booming and doing really, really well. And then by the time you get to college, the whole auto industry, kind of imploded and really kind of lost a lot of the people and punch. So really went through this big transition.
So in high school, was there anything going on in your gut, in your heart, your head that I might be interested in this medical world, whatever that might be? Anything come up there?
I was always a very, very good student, and I really did like the math and sciences. And so I didn't really think about, I don't think specifically being a physician or anything like that until I got exposed when my parents took us down to Lake of the Ozarks. And so we were down Lake of the Ozark, Missouri for about 25 years from Memorial Day to Labor Day. So both of them were teachers. And so we spent our entire summer down there. Through those experiences, I actually got into some of the emergency rooms through a family friend who was a family practitioner, introduced me to some ER physicians. And originally I was thinking maybe dentistry in late high school, college, and then it transitioned into more medicine just because it was so crazy, cool, and exciting.
I never said I got into an ER other than getting rolled in with a broken foot or something. So it's funny how you say it in terms of going in actually through the right way.
Yeah.
The fact that you had a guy in your life to show some interest in you. And
Yeah.
that's a little risky, right? He's
Yep.
taking
It
a
is. Yeah.
college kid, yeah, I know you, but um, interesting how those early people, and even later in life, how one person can give us an opportunity that can set us on a different trajectory of our lives.
So very true. I think when I look back, people ask me all the time about how do you determine like which direction you're going to be, how do you decide to be a plastic surgeon, all those things. And I think by far and away the most important thing is I think you in general decide, okay, I think I might want to be an internal medicine doctor. I like to try and find things out and kind of be sleuthy about things. Or I really like to do things with my hands. I like immediate gratification. So I'm thinking more with surgery. Once you kind of make those decisions, I really believe it's who God puts in your life. I mean, it's really the mentors that really take you under their wing. And I have a really cool, quick story about that. I was really mentored by one plastic surgeon when I got into medical school, which I really say that he was the guy that really kind of encouraged me and directed me towards this field. I hadn't seen him for probably 20 years. And after a national presentation that I gave to a couple thousand plastic surgeons, one of the things I do is a lot of complicated breast surgery and revisional surgery of the breast. This guy walks up, to the podium after I gave a presentation. And I looked down and I recognized Mike. And so I went down and talked to him, and he's like, hey, this is my last national meeting. I was really excited to see your name up on the podium, and I'm just so proud of you and all the major accomplishments you've made and all this different stuff. And he said to me, today, the teacher has become the student.
Oh, my word, I got goosebumps.
So that's the coolest thing. But I really do think it is the mentors in your life that really do determine that trajectory that you spoke about.
We often have a high volume of business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders that listen into the wow factor. And you might be wondering, well, just sounds like a plastic surgeon doctor. Just stick with us. This is going to get good. Brad is the most entrepreneurial doctor I know. And as you just heard, leading thousands of other plastic surgeons. This idea that you begin to think about, do I like to construct and do things with my hands and see that accomplishment? And that would be maybe more surgery to the sleuth aspect. I had to think about that for a second, but that's that internal on a wild goose chase, trying to figure out what's going on inside someone without, the hands and the surgery. That's fascinating. I would think many people listening never thought of those delineations. So thanks for sharing that perspective.
Yeah, you bet.
Just take us. You get out of college and you guys don't do internships as much as you do fellowships. Is that right? And you did that at MD Anderson?
Well, you actually go through a series of different training experiences, I guess I would say. So after, college, you apply to medical school, you go through 4 years of medical school, and then your third year of medical school, you start to apply for residencies. Residencies are really kind of your area of expertise. And so my residency was in plastic surgery, general surgery first, and then plastic surgery afterwards. Then when you're a resident, then you can highly subspecialize into one specific area. And for me, that was cancer reconstruction and microvascular surgery, where we would transfer body parts around to do very complex reconstructions like jaws or breast cancer or head and neck cancer. And that was at MD Anderson. So that was the final fellowship that I did before I started practice.
So here you are at this major, well-known institution down in Houston, and there's people that obviously having breast cancer. It's a cancer hospital. And then this is probably your first time interacting with people who have had their life flash before their eyes, right? There's
Right.
What is that kind of emotional thing going on for a doctor?
I think one of the coolest things specifically to plastic surgery is that we get exposed to some of the most complex, difficult areas. And we kind of deal with a lot of other surgical subspecialties and medical complications, like really bad wound infections, or just when, things just don't go right. Typically, those are the patients that we'll see. And when it comes to cancer, you have these big, big tumor resections, and there's no great way to really reconstruct them a lot of the times with local tissues. So you have to kind of transfer tissues around. How that's kind of transferred into my current life, I don't do a lot of immediate cancer reconstruction anymore, but I do a lot of very complex breast revisional surgery who have had breast cancer and or aesthetic or cosmetic breast operations that have just not gone well.
Mm-hmm.
And so about 30% of my practice now is really trying to make the best of very difficult situations. And I'll take care of patients sometimes in very vulnerable positions, where they've had 5, 6, 7, 8 or more operations, and
Oh my word.
just complication after complication. So very challenging, but those to me are just some of the incredible and often humbling, experiences that I get to step into.
So you leave MD Anderson after the resident fellowship kind of thing, is that what you call it? And then you head into a larger practice for a number of years. But during that time at this other practice, there's something going on inside of you that there's a little restlessness. There's something you want to be more creative, have more flexibility. You don't want to just stay in your lane. And I mean that in a good way. And then wake up 30 years later and say, that was my career. I'm over. I want to do something special. I want to do leading edge. So take us through that transition. Leaders are faced with this. Do I pivot? Do I pivot? And you took a major pivot and a major risk. Tell us about that.
You were actually a big part of that because you were around right when I was transitioning out of my prior practice. So there are definitely advantages to larger practices as far as stability and call coverage and all that. But when it really gets to a point where you start to practice differently or have different goals and ideas, that unless everybody has buy-in into those goals, it's just not really going to work. The other thing that really kind of made me recognize kind of what was going on is one of our good friends, Ed Dobson, when he was alive, gave a message on absolutes, beliefs, and preferences. And I actually wrote an article in our plastic surgery journal about some of the medical applications to his spiritual application. But his application was there's certain absolutes that bind everybody in a group together. And then the next phase is like beliefs, and then preferences would be like, what music do you listen to? And a belief may be like, how are you baptized or something? But core absolutes need to be foundational for you to be part of that group. Well, I really found out, it took 18 years, but I found out that, we didn't really have the same absolutes, and I was trying to hold on and change them and all that stuff. And it just wasn't going to happen. So kind of probably at the worst time financially in 2008, when the market's crashing and everything, I said, I just can't really do this anymore. I think there are pushes and pulls out of different opportunities and things that we have. And so I came home to my wife and I was just like, I've tried, I just can't do this anymore. And she's like, well, I'm behind you. And really kudos to her, because for me, I was just following my dream. It was my dream. It was something that I knew I wanted to do and really needed to do. It wasn't her dream. And so we went into this very difficult time where I transitioned out of my prior practice. We started a new practice in the basement of a surgical center that was 10 by 20 feet. And, I just basically came over with one other staff and just really kind of build my practice back up to be on the main floor of that surgical center. And then a couple of years later, moving into a new, beautiful office space in the Women's Health Center, practicing there for 10 years, and then moving into this incredible plastic surgery office and ORs and stuff that we have now. And at all of our team building things we have with the office, I always show that picture of that room. I went back to that surgical center and took a photograph of that room and said, okay, here's where everything started, because, they didn't obviously have that experience from the beginning.
This idea of absolutes, beliefs, and preferences, wow, that's a word of wisdom, because when you start to unpack that, my mind is racing. I wonder how many things in my life that are preferences, I've tried to make them absolutes for other people, and it doesn't quite work. Part of leadership is helping other people get to where they want to go. It's like asking somebody else, no, I need you to change your absolute into a preference. And that's kind of what was happening for you at your former practice. There was a different language. There's a different agreement. And so you weren't able to pull together in the same direction.
Right. As Ed Dobson said, there have been basically churches that are fractured over what sort of music is played. And obviously that's a preference. That's that tip of the triangle. And it's almost like it's upside down. It's like balancing on the tip, versus really balancing on the absolutes. And you can't really talk someone else into your absolute. You just really have to agree to disagree at that point. And so that took me 18 years to get to that point.
That's really honest and vulnerable, because that's a long time to be in class, shall we say. But you're out of class, you've graduated. What are some of the things that you see make you dependent in order to have success in your practice? What are those things that you're dependent on?
Yeah, I love the word success. I ask a lot of, influential people that I get to meet, what's your definition of success? I think that's one of the most interesting topics and stuff. And most people don't really think about that too much, For me, I think there are two critical aspects that kind of changed my foundational beliefs on what success is. The first was really becoming a Jesus follower. I mean, I was a head believer for 35 years of my life. And then when I really figured it out, after God ripped away a lot of really important things to me, he really shifted my life from being self-focused to God-focused. And when that happened, it really completely just flipped my world upside down. I mean, to repent, talks about a 180-degree turn in my life. And I became extremely other-focused. And so that was the foundation. And then the second thing, I started reading different books and listening to different speakers, including John Maxwell, who has been really influential. And he defines success as what my adoption and kind of modification of the Brad Bengtson modification of John Maxwell's success. And his definition of success is determining the gifts that God's given you, developing those gifts over a lifetime, and then sharing those gifts with others. And the others piece is really, again, becoming more other-focused than self-focused. And so fast forward when we were talking about our practice and just establishing a practice, when I had the chance to do that on my own, developing our mission statement and all of our core values, they're basically all patient-focused. So everything is completely patient-focused. And if you're going to be an employee of the Bengtson Center, you have to buy into these. And it's hard to fake those things. So you really have to almost have those things innately to be part of our team, because the core principle is to be patient-centric or other-focused. And I always tell them, if you treat a patient to the 100% of your best ability, that person that is directly in front of you, the best that you can, and make it all about them, and everybody does that in the entire practice, then with that, you'll get everything. Now, granted, you have to hire really good people that are, technically very good and really smart and do things, but that's kind of a given. If your focus, though, is other than that, if your focus is on you or your money or your time or your schedule, you're never going to achieve really success.
We all struggle with some level of pride or self-centeredness, but is it true that when you have the ability with your hands to preserve a life like a doctor, do you guys have a little extra challenge in that department, generally speaking?
More than most areas of life, I think medicine is definitely one of those. I think, quite honestly, what you do and being like a pastor, has similar sorts of kind of challenges in that your audio has to match your video. It doesn't really matter what you say, it's really what you do. So,
I like that. Your
yeah,
audio
so it
has to
has to
match your
match.
video.
And by far and away, the most important thing is your video. So if I'm up there talking about, how you need to be patient centric, but I falter in that, I mean, obviously I'm not 100% perfect in that. But if I falter in that, my staff picks up on that and will actually challenge me, right back at you. I mean, could you have handled that better? It doesn't seem like that worked out quite so well.
That just makes you real. So you go from the 10 by 20 and it progresses, but at some point you're clearing out your 401k account. You're putting all the dollars on the table. You're betting all in, and your wife is saying, "I'm with you. Let's do this."
Part of that was, are you sure? Seriously? I mean, but I can very honestly tell you there's no way that I could have done this on my own. First with God, but second with Anna. I was the one living my dream. She was the one really making the sacrifices. And she fortunately had a banking and accounting background. So she's doing all the books and all the accounting and saying, you need to work more and you need to start doing these surgeries that I never really wanted to do and stuff. She's working all night doing all that stuff. And then I'm going in doing the work. And then, she's taking care of the kids all day.
Yeah, you guys are rotating. You're
Exactly.
rotating first and third shift or something like that. So what are some of the cool things about being a plastic surgeon? Because as I opened up this time together, I just think there's so many stereotype
Sure.
of when you hear plastic surgery, and I'm not even going to say it, but you can just imagine. This is a very, very progressive area in modern medicine, if you will.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting. I have written a number of different books on Civil War medicine, and I'm a real kind of historian when it comes to surgery and plastic surgery for sure. And plastic actually comes from plastikos, which is really kind of the Greek to make new. So it's taking something originally described with patients with different wounds and stuff and doing different flaps or tissues or skin grafts to kind of make new or kind of fix a problem or defect. So it has really nothing to do with plastic.
And I'll bet the number of people that don't know that. I didn't know that. I mean, you think plastic, I'm thinking of the 2-liter. I'm thinking there's an association, right? The water bottle.
The other thing, it's kind of a double-edged sword, is plastic surgery is kind of equivalent now to cosmetic surgery. And I think most people would be pretty surprised. The majority of plastic surgery procedures or cosmetic procedures are not done by a plastic surgeon. So they're done by OBGYNs, dermatologists, family doctors. I mean, as one of my mentors used to say, everybody wants to be a plastic surgeon. So I think part of the reimbursement issues and stuff has really forced people into creating med spas and doing injectables and doing all these different things. I would argue that plastic surgeons really are the most trained. I mean, we have 5 to 7 years of surgery, experience and, fellowships and, all the experience and things. So I do think we are, in a lot of ways, the most qualified. But there are some other areas, like there's some ocular plastic surgeons that I actually refer a lot of complex eyelid procedures to and stuff like that. But all in all, I would really argue that plastic surgeons are at least best fitted to do, cosmetic surgery, but it's just one aspect of what we do. So we deal with a lot of different issues, burns, trauma, congenital, cleft lip and palate, cancer reconstruction.
Boy, that's got to be amazing, Brad, if you're able to take a cleft lip and, Google what those look like.
Yeah.
And then months later after this procedure, surgery, to see a full smile gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of what I do today is elective, or what some people would say cosmetic. But I think the real important thing is for people to really realize is plastic surgery is not equivalent to the stuff that you see on TV. It's not equivalent to, all the botch shows and all the kind of the crazy, stuff that people are doing in your state, not just your state, but, other states too. For me, what plastic surgery really is all about is restoration. So it's really creating a natural, proportional outcome that is completely normal. It's not overdone, overlifted, with a startled look or, anything. It's very natural, proportional to the body. And, like the cleft lip example that you just brought up, a person with a cleft lip, I would argue, is that cosmetic or is that reconstructive? Because if you fix a cleft lip, it doesn't make the lip function any better. It doesn't affect eating or anything like that. A cleft palate, inside the mouth is very influential or effective in that. But cleft lip does not. So is it cosmetic or is it reconstructive? So I think we beat ourselves up a lot, particularly as believers, on this whole topic. But for me, the key thing is natural, restored, very realistic sort of outcomes. And that's really what our goal is.
Brad, I ran into a friend one day whose wife had a really bad run of migraine headaches, and she tried everything, debilitating. And it found out that there was so much pressure coming through the shoulders. And she actually went to see you. And what was discovered was that by appropriately downsizing her chest size, it would relieve some tension in the shoulders and upper neck. And my buddy was like, gosh, my wife's kind of wrestling with this or whatever because it's a plastic surgeon. And yet today she walks around and says, I'm headache free. And by getting that solid counsel from a doctor who cares about the patient more than himself and getting another procedure out of the way so he can bill it, it changed her life. It's a very real deal. There are very practical things that come regularly along with the work that you do and the way you use your giftedness.
I think we beat ourselves up a lot, and particularly believers, on, again, kind of what's cosmetic and what's not. And I really look at it as more what's elective. It's really not about, because cosmetic versus reconstructive is very judgmental, right? So the example you just gave of a patient with breast hypertrophy, or what we call macromastia, or very large breasts, I've taken out, my record, Brad, is 3.5 kilograms of breast tissue.
I don't even know. That's a lot.
Amounts of, like 15 pounds of breast tissue, right? And she was still large, right? So is that reconstructive or is a breast reduction? No, it's not. I would say it's reconstructive because relieves neck pain, back pain, shoulder pain, grooving, headaches sometimes, all those sorts of things. So to me, again, and the other analogy I gave with, a small breast on one side and a big breast on the other side, we're just trying to recreate normalcy and symmetry, to the body. And, I think we just over spiritualize it sometimes. I believe God is sovereign. So he causes or allows everything that happens to us. He's not surprised about this COVID virus going on, right? If we break our nose in a car accident, does he not want us to fix it? I mean, if we got our nose on the side of our face, I mean, it's almost like an absurd sort of analogy. And then again, for believers that are still really struggling with them, I give them the cleft lip and palate analogy. The cleft palate is definitely reconstructive. It affects speech and hearing and all those sorts of things. But is a cleft lip reconstructive or cosmetic? I mean,
Yeah.
we had a really interesting thing where when I took my boards in plastic surgery, the board examiner showed me a completely normal lip. And he said, okay, Brad, you're shipwrecked on an island where everybody on the island has a cleft lip. And they have a kid, the king's son, is born with a completely normal lip. How do you create this normal lip into a cleft lip? So it's almost like, how do you do that surgery backwards, right? So it's like, wow. I mean, we go all over the world fixing these kids' lips, which is amazing. I mean, but to me, if you're going to fall on reconstructive versus cosmetic, I would fall on the cosmetic surgery procedure of that. The key thing is it elective or is it emergent, urgent? Do I have a ruptured appendix I need to get out or whatever? So leave the judgment at home and that.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to say. The reality of it is it's a personal thing. It's your body. And there is clear direction in God's word about he gives us things for our enjoyment. And so if that's a preference that you want to make that change, I always love it when it comes up, well, that's wasting money. Well, if that's the case, I might have wasted money yesterday on something that someone would think is a waste, but to me it was value. Right. So value is in the eye of the beholder. And
absolutely.
And I think a lot of times in these conversations, you can get way down in the weeds, but you start to, if you really got to know the person who's making those comments, and they probably don't even do it to your face, they've got a lot of other junk in their trunk they're working on. So as a plastic surgeon, you're given some time to the local hospital, at least some point in your career. So then I would imagine you end up having a shift in the ER, right? You're on-call plastic surgeon. What in the world is that like? I mean, the phone rings, and hey, I would presume maybe a car accident, but what kind of stories come out of that?
Oh my gosh. I mean, the number of facial fractures and dog bites and, that usually happen between, 9 and 3 o'clock in the morning, a lot of bad car accidents. It's just horrific. It really is a huge commitment, to a specialty and to your family as well. And what's crazy, Brad, is now that I'm not in the hospital as much, I'm mainly there visiting family and friends and stuff now. I walk through, and what really strikes me is you forget about all the crazy stuff that's going on because it's not in your face every day, and so you really, kind of have forgotten about a lot of the, different things that we used to do, particularly earlier in training.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, why would there be an increase in dog bites between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m.? I mean, that.
Right.
Have you had some of those situations where it's the mom and the younger child, and I mean, they come in and it's probably panic stricken. There's so much identity with our face and all that, and
right.
you're trying to help them, and you
right.
do. You're giving yourself away. Even sometimes you don't end up getting paid. If I remember some of those stories of, there's definitely a generous spirit that comes along with agreeing to be a doctor.
It's an amazing opportunity. I mean, in medicine, and particularly in surgery and plastic surgery, you get exposed to people at their best and at their worst. I mean, it's just really an amazing opportunity and stuff. But to be able to restore, really just beauty, just to a natural sort of outcome as best as we possibly can. And with some of the techniques and technologies today, it's pretty amazing the different outcomes that we can achieve.
So you're in an operating room. I've never been in one, certainly not being operated on, and then observing one either. So you're in there. There's nurses. There's the guy that puts you out, the anesthesiologist,
guy,
right? And it's bright. I've seen the bright lights, but what's going on in there? Is it everybody all serious? Is there music playing? Is people telling jokes? I mean, just tell us a little bit. I don't want to.
I mean, it's very different. It's really funny when I one of the first surgeries that I was ever allowed to do. It's called when a staff surgeon would turn you a case. So they're going to allow you to do a portion of the surgery. There's this old crotchety plastic surgeon, but it really ended up being a really cool guy, very helpful and influential in me. We were doing this little scar revision in this lady's armpit. And so he's kind of down underneath her arm and I'm, up on top. And he did not allow any talking, any words, anything. He would hold his hand out and his scrub nurse knew him so well, she would put the right instrument in that he would need. And so there was no music, there was nothing. So he said, Brad, you want to do this? I'm like, sure. And so he gave me the knife and I was like, it was kind of hard where I was. So I said, do you mind if I come down there and you come up here? And he goes, oh my goodness. He goes, you give the kid a scalpel and he already wants your job. And so this really a positioning thing for me, right? But really that expanded to, today, I feel like one of my stories, I probably don't have time to tell, but I kind of introduced live music or music into MD Anderson Cancer Center. I kind of brought those portable CD players that had separate speakers and stuff, the original ones, and introduced them to music in the ORs that they didn't really, have at that time. I always tell everybody that's one of my main contributions to MD Anderson. But today, I have, I think, 64 Sonos speakers in our space. We have 21 large screen televisions. We listen to all types of music. We have, different people that like different types of music. My staff knows I like Seal. So, we listen to Seal on Fridays, Friday afternoons. When that Old Town Road came out, that song.
Oh, yeah.
I would sneak outside and I would play that at the very end of the day, for the staff and stuff. But we really have a good time. Serious when we need to be serious, but
sure, of course.
Obviously, it's a very fun. Operating is the most fun that I have, so I really enjoy it.
So back in the day, not now, of course, you were known to tell a joke or two in the OR. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So you would how did that work? Because you have different personalities, different nurses, different people in the room. And the thing is that surgery often isn't 15 or 20 minutes. You could be in there hours.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Multiple, 3-4 hours. You're on your feet and you're focused, but.
Yeah, you have to have fun. We do some really fun things. We actually have a word of the day. And so it's this like really complex medical word usually, but not necessarily medical. And one of the nurses, when we go through the alphabet where it comes up this, risorgimento or something, which means to gradually enlarge or something. And so everybody tries to guess what it is. There's definitely a lot of levity and stuff like that. So we really have a good time.
Oh, that's good. So today, like your practice surgery facility is really leading edge nationwide. You referenced to where I live, which is in the Newport Beach, California area. Yet, I would say from the outside, because I haven't been inside of them, but looking at the video of your facility, and we'll link to it in the show notes, you have to see it. It's so worth going in there at bradformsma.com, and you'll pull up this podcast conversation. Not only are you going to hear Brad do a nice walkthrough, we hear a little more of your heart, which I want you to explain of the why behind you do what you do. But it is so disarming and so comfortable, and it's not sterile. And so you made a decision to make it feel you're already helping people get unnerved, if you will, or if that's the right word, to just calm down. And in that setting, what's the science behind that? Why is that so important to you as you have this, world-class facility?
Yeah, I think as a plastic surgeon, and I think with dealing with elective procedures, we really forget that it may have taken a guy or a gal like 15 years to build up enough courage to come in to talk about something. So again, it's a very vulnerable, sort of situation already. So we wanted to really create something that was really a reflection of, our personalities in that. And first companies and the architectural group, AMDG and Peter Baldwin that we used really gave Anna and I just kind of unlimited charge of what we wanted to create.
And that's rare.
It was very rare. And we ask them all the time, if we get too far out there, you don't think you can lease this, some of the other space we lease about half of the space, but, bring us back, a little bit. But they're like, no, this is going to be incredible. So it's very non-medical. I have some buddies drive by and give me a hard time every once in a while. It's like, yeah, I'm just driving by the Bengtson Center, Taj Mahal, casino, ski lodge, and just wanted to check to see how you're doing or whatever. But we wanted it to be just like a high-end residence, but very comfortable, not over the top or anything. And the whole design is really based around that. When you walk in, you're met actually by a concierge, which is really rare. You don't walk up to a front desk person or whatever. We have multiple people that greet each patient, most of them by name, after a while, get them to where they need to be. We have this beautiful living room with fireplace and all that stuff. I'm sure some of the COVID stuff is going to change, some of the social distancing aspects of things, but super comfortable and just the flow, everything about it, the high end technology, all the new products and everything kind of flow. But really what pulls it all together is our staff. We have an amazing staff of 60 people now. It's amazing to think about starting with 2 and having 60 staff now that provide care for these patients. And it's just an incredible experience. We hear all the time, I just don't want to leave. I mean, I just can't believe how wonderful this place is. That's really the idea, right?
So what are the top 5 things that you do for serving people in this broad space?
I think the individual thing, if you're talking about kind of what makes this different, I think the individual things is like the concierge service. And one of the reasons why we left our prior place was parking was a real problem. So now we have like 400 parking spots and it's really easy to get in and out. It's on the nicer area of town, closer to the airport. It's wide open in a suburb, so it's really easy access. Again, you're treated almost like we're welcoming somebody into our home. With guys, we have a man's lounge, a man cave, we call it, that's just really cool. So, it's hard for some guys to sit out in the lobby with all these ladies. So we have an opportunity for them.
You bring up an interesting point, Brad, because I think a lot of people would say, oh, generally speaking, it's mostly women who have procedures.
Right.
You just mentioned having the man cave at the center. Like, tell us a little bit about some of the top procedures you do for men and for women, just to give a little context. And you also you have patients from not just West Michigan, but around the Midwest and around the country. You mentioned airports, so they fly in. I mean, they're coming to you because you're at the top of the pile.
Well, we've actually treated patients from every state. About 20% now of our patients come outside of about a 300-mile radius. So we're seeing patients from Canada, Europe, and mainly flying in for a little more complicated revisional stuff that I do. So a lot of the majority of the procedures that I do are breast related. Again, either breast cancer revision, where there's been too much scar tissue or not enough scar tissue. Particularly with too much scar tissue, the breast can be very firm and painful, and there's no great way to reconstruct that unless you use some really newer, innovative products that will allow for a very consistent, improved outcome. So those are a lot of the main procedures we do. We do a lot of abdominal surgery, like after babies, tummy tucks. We do some facial surgery as well, of all different types of facial reconstruction and aesthetic or cosmetic procedures of the face. Guys are really interesting. One of the biggest, coolest things that we started doing is hair transplant.
Oh.
we got this new system. You can transfer individual follicles of hair. So if you could see my hairline today, I actually had this about 9 months ago, had about 3,000 grafts transferred, and you can't even see the scars. They individually transfer the hair follicles and can restore hairlines and stuff. So we're doing a lot of hair transplant.
How long does that take? I mean, that, by the way, I notice it with your hair, but then I was thinking, well, maybe it's just the COVID deal and he hasn't been able to go get a haircut because it's illegal to get a haircut right now in Michigan, right? And I think in California too.
I think you might be right. Yeah. I think you're definitely right on that. Yeah. So it's just really cool, new technologies that, we're doing. And guys, they really do a lot of the non-surgicals as well. So we do a lot of cool sculpting and kind of fat freezing and some facial lifting that doesn't require surgery. They're doing a lot more. About 20% of our patients now are guys.
Okay. So there's this visionary part of you, but then there's also this entrepreneurial. And, I love the word entrepreneurial because it just tells me identify a problem and move at solving it. A few years ago, you saw a problem and moved at it, and it's maybe not exactly what you thought when you started, but you got to start. Tell us a little bit about that invention and the game-changing potential it has on modern medicine.
Well, fortunately, God has really gifted me with not only seeing these incredibly difficult problems to treat, but also the desire to actually do something about it. And usually these ideas come to me between 2 and 3 in the morning. I used to have a little notepad by my bed because I would they just come out of wherever. And so I have actually 5 different device medical patents. We have probably over 20 patents now total, but 5 different devices. The most transformative one that we have is actually going to launch, God willing, in the next 3 months. And we've been working on this, from kind of a napkin to now for over 8 years. And the biggest single problem in surgery, and it's universal between general surgery, head and neck, every surgical subspecialty, the biggest single problem we have left, it's not infection anymore because of antibiotics and all that. It's poor wound healing. And what happens when we do surgery, it elevates the skin or tissues, and fluid can collect underneath, and the tissues just don't heal down quite as well. Surgical drains have been used for about 60, 70 years, but essentially they're unchanged and they don't really work. And so what we've done is come up with a new concept. It's called Interi. It's INTERI. We're just launching the website actually right now. And what it does, it will be a surgical drain replacement where it actually provides a higher degree of negative pressure. So drains don't work because they're usually just one little manifold that goes into one specific area. And their negative pressure to draw out the fluid and close the space down is not high enough to accomplish that. And so what we have is we have a new device that actually looks kind of like a trident. It has like 4 different prongs or manifolds in it. And then it's hooked to a closed container that has a pump and a higher degree of pressure, negative 125 millimeters of pressure, that draws that fluid out and holds the tissues together so there's no fluid can collect. And basically when you oppose or bring the tissues together, then the body just does what God designed it to do and heal.
Oh.
And so we really, we've done some first-in-man studies. So we've tested this, so to speak, on 25 patients, and 0 complications, 100%, wound closure and all that. So we're very confident it's going to be very effective at what we're going to do. And Brad, I tell you, this really is one of those things that could be one of the most transformational procedures in surgery. And so we're super, super excited about it.
Wow, that's really exciting. So you said 25 patients, but do you start with human beings or do you do it with animals first, or how does that work?
We actually operated a lot of pigs. And pigs, by the way, for all you researchers, they know that pigs love marshmallows. They'll pretty much do anything for a marshmallow. So we did a lot of these initial procedures on larger animals. And then we got it to the point where it was safe enough and effective enough to do in people.
I would use the words over my skis when I'm listening to you. I'm a little bit, just didn't know that was a problem. That's cool that you're in that space and so close to it. And then I think you've said, gosh, I get these crazy ideas at 2 or 3 in the morning. So those of you that are getting those, you're not strange. This is what happens when you're an entrepreneur. Those of us around us sometimes go, oh, great, it's the idea, the flavor of the month. But I heard 8 years, and so good for you of persevering. So often inventions can be perceived as, I woke up one day and it was my idea, and the next day we were pumping it out of the factory. And there's a lot of road and a lot of patience and hardship and licensing and approvals and setbacks. And so good for you for continuing to push through.
Yeah, my dad used to say anything of significant value has a lot of significant work behind it. So I think it's really rare to have those lottery type moments for most things. It's an unbelievable amount of work and energy.
On the Wow Factor, we always have an opportunity to share a few words of wisdom for leaders, entrepreneurs, whoever's listening. And I thought, I certainly want to hear yours. You've shared several already. And we'll definitely make a point of linking to your website in the show notes. It'll be clear there how if people wanted to learn more about your practice and about the way that you help people, maintain their natural beauty. I like how you said that, by the way, before we go to the wow. Yes, I live in California, and there are times that I've seen some things in excess, and I would start by saying that happens when you're at a traffic intersection. It's like, well, there's 2 Rolls Royces and 2 Ferraris. So that excess can, shall we say, move into other areas. And so when you say proportional and things like that, there are times that I laugh. I want to be appropriate on wow factor, but how do you help people manage expectations and bring them back into reality when they might be watching television or looking online and then you get a false sense of reality maybe?
I really start out by saying, well, first of all, because that really is our kind of profile, people will come to me because of that natural proportional sort of outcome. A lot of times the people are looking for overdone, over big, over whatever, actually never even call us. So my big mantra is the best plastic surgery is in patients you can't tell have had it. So again, it's that natural, proportional sort of thing. And majority of patients, certainly in West Michigan, that's really what they're looking for. I think our role as a plastic surgeon or a consultant is not to give a patient what they want or what they think they want, is to give them what is within a normal range of proportionality. So, if you're talking about like the breast, a lot of people have different aspects about breasts. Well, a lot of breast surgery that we do, a young lady will come in with an A cup on one side and a triple D on the other side. Back to our prior discussion, is that cosmetic or is that reconstructive?
Seriously, how did that happen?
To see on both sides, right? Let's get to a natural, proportional, sort of outcome. So if they're looking for something outside of the range of what I think is normal, or and sometimes I'll push it a little bit if their body can kind of handle it. It's different for somebody who's 6 foot and 210 versus somebody who's 4'10" and 100 pounds, right? But if they're looking for something outside of that range, then I'm not their plastic surgeon. So that's just, the way that I kind of approach it.
So we're going to get to that word of wisdom, but I just had another thought. So you're out to dinner with another couple and someone who you've, operated on and helped, and there's a connection. They feel this emotional connection or whatever it is. And so they come up to the table and they're like, "Hi, Dr. Bengtson." Like, how do you respond in that because of the HIPAA thing and all that? Or does that not happen?
Oh, it happens. It's really, really funny. And because of HIPAA, I'll often operate on a lot of my wife's friends, and I can't tell her really, and so her friends will come back and say, "Oh, I'm so happy, and she's like, "What? I mean, he doesn't even tell me." And so it's really funny. There are definite categories of people when you go out, and it's very common. I mean, Grand Rapids is not a huge town, but even the lakeshore and stuff, I'll see a lot of patients out. And so sometimes I'll see 5 to 10 patients, out to dinner or whatever. And it's really hilarious. Some people will glance at you and look away, like they obviously don't want any
no
contact.
cover blown.
Some will look and smile or wave or something like that. Some will come up and say hi, like you just said, and those sorts of things. If they say to the group or whatever, "Dr. Bengtson is my plastic surgeon," whatever, then obviously that's not a HIPAA violation. And then some people will come up and grab all of their friends. Usually it's a younger female with a little bit of a lower cut dress or shirt, and say, "Hey, everybody, this is Dr. Bengtson. He's my plastic surgeon."
Oh, jeez.
So I'm going, "Oh my gosh." So that's kind of the realm of different options of patients we see.
It's kind of this funky celebrity, but not always celebrity thing that you just kind of have to, and you're really kind of like a lawyer, that attorney-client privilege thing, right? Because you can't say anything. And so anyway, that's funny. So
That's
your word
fun.
of wisdom for our listeners, what would they be?
Yeah, I think, you told me about this question, so I've been thinking about it a little bit. And I do think a fair amount of we've kind of covered already. I do think to have people think about their success, again, what gifts God's given them, how am I maximizing those gifts, and then how can I share those gifts with others? It's always, to me, about giving back, teaching, and then determining what that looks like to you. I think one of the main things for people outside of medicine is make everything you do about somebody else. If you're in medicine, it's about your patients or your clients. If you're outside of medicine, it's your clients or, staff or whoever God is putting in front of you. And I really do believe that if your focus is really on them, then all of the other things just naturally flow as far as success and money and all those things. I think it's really important to, particularly in this time, to seek God's wisdom versus earthly guidance. I love that my favorite definition of wisdom is seeing things through God's perspective. And so I constantly seek, and I'm talking to my boys, particularly about what is wisdom. And, when Solomon asked for anything, he asked for wisdom, and look what he achieved, with that. I think my last one just for you, brother, is be generous. Be generous of your time, the gifts, the stuff. Ultimately, I think it's about when we leave this life, it's about what we've given, that we're going to be remembered by. It's not all the stuff. It's not the accolades or accomplishments that we think we've made. It's really what sort of impact have we made on others.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being on the Wow Factor. This was a fascinating conversation for a little different kind of a leader that we've had than in the past, where you're leading in the medical arena in such a cutting-edge, world-class way. I'm excited to see what happens with the interior, if I said that right, invention. We wish you the best in your coming years of that development and with your practice at the Bengtson Center.
Thanks a lot, brother. I appreciate your time. It was great.
What a fascinating conversation with Dr. Bengtson. How about that one person can give you an opportunity who God puts in your life to take you where you need to go? That was the case for him and an early surgeon. And then years later at a conference where Dr. Bengtson was getting an award, and here that very person who propelled him and gave him opportunity says, today the teacher became the student. It's that whole baton passing thing. It's fascinating. And he just talked about how there's absolutes, beliefs, and preferences, and really went backwards from a big practice to a 10 by 20 room in a basement, built it back up because his absolutes weren't aligning with former partners. How about that audio has to match the video, and the video matters so much because optics matter. And of course, now we know plasticose, to make new, but they call it plastic surgery. Doesn't have anything to do with really plastic. And just it's a gift to restore beauty and the ideas in the morning. Of course, the funny one for me in the whole episode was this idea that people are different. And so some people will see him in a restaurant and they'll quickly look away. Some will give him a slight smile. And some will come bouncing up to the table with their friends and want everybody to know that he's their plastic surgeon. Well, great conversation with Dr. Bengtson. We really wish him the best on this invention that really helps people heal quicker. Never knew that was a need. It's amazing how people come up with these ideas. I think God gives them to them, and then they put them into practice. And in closing, I love the line that he had about his dad. You know, Dad used to say, anything of significant value has significant amounts of effort behind it. I hope that you as leaders and entrepreneurs and business people hear that today and know this work is worth it, but it's often a slog, and we just keep going and we keep going because we believe in what we're about and we believe in helping other people. Next week is Joe Willard. Joe is based in Tulsa, Oklahoma, had a storied career in business with a vast sales team. He has some one-liners you will never, ever forget. And I look forward to introducing you to Joe Willard next week. So until next time, I'm Brad Formsma, your host of the Wow Factor Leadership Podcast, where we give you words of wisdom to help you grow in business and beyond.